Hey, what's up everybody, this is Muth24, and today I thought I'd take a look at another manga volume of mine. I've got this new setup here with a shelf unit that I just bought, so this is just how I'm going to film the video for now. I may go ahead and change that for later reviews for my Gundams and stuff. But anyways, I thought I'd go ahead and take a look at the Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past volume. This is a manga volume in the Zelda series that I was a little iffy about when I picked it up because I wasn't sure how they were going to tackle this story because for those who maybe aren't as familiar with Link to the Past, it's a Super Nintendo Zelda, and it's one of the most highly regarded Super Nintendo games out there. I really enjoyed it, not as much as I enjoyed the later Zelda games, but one thing that is interesting about it is that it doesn't have as much of a story as the later Zelda games. It's definitely got more of a story than the first two Zelda games, and I think of the original three, being Zelda, Zelda 2, and Link to the Past, that this one's my favorite of the bunch. But I was really curious how they were going to tackle that story, considering that there isn't as much of it as with the other ones. Now, this isn't my favorite Zelda manga volume. I don't think it's quite as good as the Ocarina of Time volumes, but I do think that it's definitely better than the Majora's Mask volume, just because there's not as much they have to cover in such a short time. And they do go ahead and take some creative liberties with it and stuff, which I expected they would, but I think they do it in a pretty good way. So, for the Link to the Past game, you have Link summoned by Princess Zelda to come to the dungeon and save her because the 6 sages have disappeared, and Aghanim, who is the sorcerer, this evil sorcerer figure, is basically planning to use Zelda as a sacrifice to plunge the realm into the Dark World, which is essentially the same thing that happens in this manga volume, and there's Aghanim there. This volume has a new character, however, who was created especially for this story, and her name is Ganti, and there's a picture of her there. She's basically a thief. She's sort of along the lines of Tetra, although not quite as developed just because of the length of this volume. But I think she does pretty well for this story. She tags along with Link on his adventures, and is both kind of an aid and a hindrance, and there's sort of some confliction that happens with them. Link is pretty generic, admittedly, just because, you know, it's a relatively short volume for the Zelda manga volumes, and I believe it's like 9 or 10 out of the series, one of the later ones that they did. But I also really like the way they portray the Dark World in this. The Dark World was really cool in the game. It's a really pivotal point when you're transported there, and it becomes a huge part of the gameplay in the Super Nintendo game. And for this volume, what they did is they took the element of having people transform into animals when they go into the Dark World, except for in this one, instead of it being kind of goofy where, you know, Link turns into a bunny rabbit unless you have this jewel, they make them a little bit more menacing and a little bit more intimidating. Like there's wolves and foxes and cats and stuff there, as you can see. So it definitely makes it seem a little bit more dark and dangerous of a place. The story is a little bit more specific and concrete in certain points, in tying it to the likes of Ocarina of Time and some of the other Zelda games. And I think that was done deliberately since this volume was made much later than the actual game was. I don't know exactly when the other volumes came out, but I know Ocarina of Time obviously came out closer to the game's release than this one came to Super Nintendo, since this was one of the last Zelda manga volumes they did. They also have, it's kind of a trend in all these Zelda manga volumes where the dungeons and the different areas will be kind of just glossed over for the sake of time. In this one, they kind of make some logical reasoning for that, and that is that every time that Link gets these medallions that he needs to unlock the Master Sword from his pedestal, it basically warps him to another region, and they'll have to go get through some puzzle or fight an enemy there, and basically each medallion just warps him to a new area. So it's not like they're just kind of cheating and jumping from one place to the next. It's like, oh, this is what the medallions are doing to, you know, help further the story. So I didn't mind that so much as, like, Majora's Mask, they just kind of ran through everything real quick, and it was a little bit disappointing because I felt like the dungeons and bosses in Majora's Mask were really creative, whereas this one, they're still cool for the time and everything, although they're not quite as exciting as some of the later ones just because of the limited technology or whatever of the Super Nintendo. Now that said, there is kind of a... It's not really divided up quite the same as the other volumes. A lot of them you'll have like different parts or different chapters or whatever. This one, it does have that same sort of format, although it just kind of feels like it flows from one thing to the next pretty smoothly. And the story feels like it's actually split into two halves, one before the Dark World and one after after they enter the Dark World, which makes sense because that's kind of how the game was set up anyways. So I really did like that, and I thought the ending was pretty cool too. It's not quite the, I don't know, typical cliche hero saves heroine thing that I thought it was going to be, which was cool. But yeah, I enjoyed this volume. I really did. I enjoyed it more than I thought I was going to, and I think that's a good thing. I am a little bit disappointed they don't have many more Zelda manga volumes. I think the only one that I'm missing of the bunch now is the Minish Cap volume, and I'll probably get that at some point. I do also have the Phantom Hourglass volume, which I'll review at some point in the future. But yeah, I definitely enjoyed this. I think if you like A Link to the Past or just Zelda in general, this is a really, really fun volume to read. It's not that long, as I mentioned. And I even like the art style of it, too. It kind of reminds me of Ocarina of Time. It's not quite as heavily detailed in some regards, but it's definitely a little bit more realistic. And you get the classic medieval fantasy vibe out of everything in this volume. So that's pretty much it for this review. And with that, I will see you guys next time.